For the first time in history, war crimes are being investigated as they're happening. No matter what kind of peace is achieved in Kosovo, there is no statute of limitations on war crimes. If the executioners and their leaders are indicted and arrested, they will be prosecuted by the UN War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague. Over the past few weeks, hundreds of thousands of people have been deported from their country at gunpoint. They end up at refugee camps along Kosovo's border, bringing tales of rape, executions, and mass murder. Once they reach the relative safety of a camp like this one, perhaps it's easy to forget the real reason these people say they left Kosovo. Because of acts of terror so chilling and so numerous that even the International War Crimes Tribunal says that with hundreds of investigators, it could only begin to scratch the surface of this tragedy.
It's really just overwhelming, I mean, in terms of the numbers of witnesses we have.
You said Clint Williamson was once a prosecutor in New Orleans. Now he leads a team from the UN War Crimes Tribunal scouring these refugee camps for evidence.
In this place alone, there's 10 or 15,000 people who all have knowledge of crimes.
What goes through your mind when you are investigating crimes on this scale?
Where it touches you and makes an impact, I think, is when you're speaking person to person with witnesses. You see photographs of a family that has been killed. This is very difficult.
Today, investigators find a critical witness to one of the worst slaughters in Kosovo. Lutfi Thaci says he saw 156 people executed, including his father, outside a town called Izbica. Did you see them kill your father?
Oh.
Yes. I was hiding 600 feet away, but I couldn't do anything. Because I didn't have a gun, they would have killed me as well.
How did you know that there were 156 people killed?
Because I saw it with my own eyes. 2 days later, the police left and we buried the bodies.
Another set of eyes was also watching Izbica that day. David Sheffer, the State Department's war crimes expert, explains.
You're seeing a very small area of Kosovo, it's Izbica, and you'll see a large number of small dots here. Now, we're able to determine through our analysts that these, in fact, are freshly dug individual grave sites. Now, that in itself would be remarkable, just the image. But we're able to piece together an enormous amount of information about Izbica that puts together a composite that this supports. We have now refugee accounts that actually went back after the Serb had left the area and buried the victims of those killings in these graves. In Kosovo, it's really almost a textbook example of the whole complex of the laws of war being violated. You have a military force which in fact is assaulting a civilian population. And that fits a very clear pattern of first the shelling of a village, then the sweep into the village with snipers positioned around the village, and the terrorizing of the population within the village.
These graphic images are some of the strongest evidence of the terror. The Yugoslav authorities won't allow investigators into Kosovo, but they didn't count on so many people having home video cameras. Hearing awful screams from a neighbor's house, a young wedding photographer named Shpetim risked his own life to record what happened and smuggle the tape out.
The police were shouting, "We will wipe out all the Albanians. We will kill you all." I wanted to document with my camera what was happening to the Albanians in Kosovo, so that everyone could see.
These men appear to have been executed in cold blood. shot in the head. Look how they've killed him, this woman cries. You have lost your father, a mother tells her daughter. So this is the father of that child?
Yes, he was a very good man. These are my cousins.
And why were they targeted? Were they KLA?
No, they were definitely not KLA fighters. They were just at home. I feel terrible for the children. They are so traumatized by what they've seen. I have no idea why this is happening. I just don't understand.
What about Yugoslav army soldiers, special police forces and paramilitaries specifically targeting civilians? That's a war crime, isn't it?
Why should they want to target those civilians?
Misha Gavrilovic is from the Serbian Information Center. He blames NATO for the mayhem in Kosovo. Are you saying that the ethnic Albanians of Kosovo are fleeing the NATO bombs?
And the conditions created by the NATO bombs, because the whole region is being bombed into a rubble.
I'm going to show you some tape that might explain some of this. Mr. Gavrilovic, this is an old man. He's got clearly a bullet wound in the head. That to me looks like an execution. This man as well. Who do you think did this? A NATO bomb?
I don't know who did it. I mean, how can I know?
Hundreds of thousands of ethnic Albanians from Kosovo have left in the last month, and almost all of them tell the same story, the story of summary executions, of being terrorized. Are tens of thousands of ethnic Albanians lying, or is Belgrade lying?
If you select from within groups of people, you're going to get your particular line of story.
The story 10-year-old Dren tells is about the worst we heard.
We were sleeping in the basement when my mom woke us up and said the police are coming. Within 2 minutes, they rammed their way inside. Then they started shooting us one by one. I was shot in the arm, and then they set the house on fire. As they left, they said, "You wanted NATO? See what NATO is doing for you now."
Dren's father and the other men of the family were hiding, believing the Serb forces would never kill women and children. They were wrong.
I lost my wife, who was a teacher, my daughter, who was 8, my son, who was 5, and my youngest daughter. She would be 4 years old if she had survived.
She was killed on her birthday?
Yes. I just couldn't believe what happened until I saw the burned ashes. And I started to cry inside.
Luli, who did you lose? What happened to your family?
I lost 9 members of my family. My mother, my wife, and 5 children.
You had 5 children? All of them are dead?
All of them.
The cruelest wound the killers inflicted on Dren is a memory that still haunts him, the pleas of his 2-year-old sister. Because of his own wounds, he couldn't pull her out of their burning house. He couldn't save her. Bihar, do you know who did this?
Yes, I do.
So you are ready to testify?
Yes, I'm ready. At first, I wanted to join the Kosovo Liberation Army, but I was scared of becoming a killer myself. So I'm going to leave it to the War Crimes Tribunal.
Eyewitnesses are already giving evidence that will now enter the tribunal's records. Louise Aber is the tribunal's chief prosecutor, and she'll sift through the mountain of evidence that's sealed inside this vault in The Hague. It'll be her job to file indictments against the architects of this terror.
It's not enough to document crimes or even to document low-key perpetrators. At least for our purposes, we want to explore where's the evidence of the actual exercise of power.
So in that case, can you not then indict Slobodan Milosevic for command responsibility under legal conventions?
Possibly. No one who commits a war crime on the whole territory of the former Yugoslavia since 1991 is immune from answerability before our court.
The State Department's David Sheffer.
Is Milosevic a war criminal?
I can't think of another example elsewhere in the world where the opportunity so starkly presents itself and the institution exists, a war crimes tribunal, for a full-scale investigation of a leader's conduct in office.
Gabrielle Kirk MacDonald was once a federal judge in Texas. Now she is the tribunal's main judge.
How important is it, ultimately, to get the big fish and to get them soon?
I think it's very important. I think the failure of the international community to arrest major figures, in a sense, emboldens other persons to commit these crimes.
Has the world learned nothing from its experiences over the last 50 years?
I don't know. Apparently, we haven't. We said never again. But in reality, it's been ever again. This has been the bloodiest century ever.